turnout has been low even in the strongholds of the ruling party. Peninah Karibe has been covering the vote in Eldoret. That's a town northwest of Nairobi in the Rift Valley. We spoke to her a little earlier.
Back in August with the first vote, there was a carnival atmosphere here. It suddenly quieted this time. Polling stations opened on time, but voting got off to a slow start and it didn't quite pick up the pace. Still, those who did come out to vote made it clear they believe their vote counts.
I want a leader, and we as young people decided to vote so that we can move on. We don't want to retrogress.
We voted for our president. At the end of the day, our decision was nullified. So we came up today because we wanted to maintain what we had voted the other time.
Most in Eldoret support the ruling Jubilee Party. It is the hometown of the deputy president, and he brushed off concerns about the numbers.
The legitimacy of this election is going to be measured not by the assessment of people. It's going to be measured against the assessment of the Constitution. Will this election meet the constitutional threshold for us to have a president? That is the yardstick upon which this election will be measured. And I want to tell you, we will get to that yardstick.
Ruto has also urged Kenyans to keep the peace, whether they voted or not. Peninah Karibe, CGTN, in Eldoret, Kenya.
Well, this is an unprecedented election here in Kenya. Well, to try to help us to understand more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by Gabriel Muthuma, and he's a political analyst. Gabriel, thank you very much for coming in. Now,
thanks for having me.
The voter turnout across Kenya has been one of contrasts, as we've just seen. Some would argue that the electoral process has lacked one of its key elements, i.e. that of legitimacy. How would you describe this rerun election?
Well, thanks, Karen. And actually, let me begin by saying that what we've seen today in the voting process is actually a very critical part of what democracy in Kenya represents. Now, if you look at the grand scheme of things, when you're talking about the legal and the legitimacy factor, the process in itself is legal, because it gets its strength from the Supreme Court, which, told the IEBC, go out there, do another election within 60 days. That is covered clearly within the Kenyan Constitution. So when you're looking at people who form the basis of saying this process is not legit, is because they have several things which they thought were never addressed by the IEBC. But the legality in itself, what legitimizes the process is, you saw the Chief Justice himself, who went out in Kisii to vote. That in itself just tells you he's legalizing the process. So it is legitimate as far as he is concerned and the people who came out to vote. But at the end of the day, the people who belong to the other side of NASA and people who are like, what, this is not a legal or a legitimate process, they will tell you that IEBC failed to do 1, 2, 3 things, and as such, it is not a legitimate
But
process.
also some members of the IEBC also said that they were worried that it wasn't going to be free and fair. They couldn't.
In fact, I do agree with you. I do agree with you because, NASA came and said we have several things that we've put across what they call some sort of reforms that they wanted to be taken care of, the irreducible minimums, if you will. And they said, if you don't take care of this, then we will not accept going into this election because of 1, 2, 3. And by the way, they were supported by some members of the IEBC. But whether or not that is a legal or a legitimate issue, the Supreme Court gave a directive, and that is what IEBC has actually kept to.
Let's talk about the opposition. On Wednesday, the leader Raila Odinga, he announced the transformation of his NASA coalition into what he referred to as a resistance movement. What does that mean exactly? What is that going to mean?
He never went deep actually to define that which he wanted, but all along the independency that they've been fighting was that of IEBC. Now they've morphed from NASA and it has come to NRM. Now as a resistance, you've actually had at Uhuru Park, where they met yesterday, them saying we are going to work around a narrative whereby if we tell our supporters to boycott several products and services, they have to do that. So this is a resistance. We have to push in a little bit to ask, Is this going to be just a resistance where people are just going to boycott products or services? Or is it going to be one where people are talking about taking up arms and going to the forest like Africans understand it? You know, when we hear about resistance, the people we are thinking about is the CONI, the LRA, you know, the Matakoi in Mount Elgon. That is what Kenyans have encompassed in their minds as being a resistant movement. We just have to wait and see.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you very much for your analysis. That was Gabrielle Muthuma there. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks, Karen.